BMAT is a formula that explains how user behavior can be manipulated, and it's used by smartphone developers and social media companies and app developers to make their products as addictive as possible and to influence your behavior. And by understanding the specific components that make up this formula, we can then reverse engineer that to then make the undesirable behavior as difficult as possible for us to engage in. So let's go through BMAT now and explain exactly how it works, and then how we can arm ourselves at each step of this equation to give yourself the best chance of success. So BMAT stands for behavior equals motivation times by ability times by trigger. So the way this works for addictive apps, for example, or addictive social media, is the behavior that the social media platform want is for you to be endlessly scrolling on their platform. That's the behavior. So the motivation part of this equation is generally a form of instant gratification. So you know that if you go on a social media platform and start scrolling, you are going to see things that are going to stimulate you and gratify you. So that's where the motivation comes from. It's the ability to get instant gratification. The ability, the easier something is for you to do, the more likely you are to do it. So social media platforms are free. The apps on the home screen of your phone are incredibly easy to access. The apps themselves are very strong colors that stand out and really capture your attention. Finally, you've got the trigger to actually do this. There's two kinds of triggers, internal and external triggers. So an external trigger could be from an email notification or from a smartphone notification coming up on the home screen of your phone, or they could be internal triggers. And what habit forming products generally do is they start with an external trigger, which could be an advert or one of the things I've just mentioned, and they trigger you enough times for you to complete the behavior for you to then develop an internal trigger where you do it without even thinking about it. So for example, with social media, the second you feel a sense of boredom or pain in doing something less stimulating than going on social media, the trigger internally arises to then go to these apps. In the case of addictive and excessive smartphone usage, here's what we do. We start by putting our phone on grayscale. That's going to make your phone screen look incredibly boring and incredibly unstimulating compared to how it looks on color mode. And as a result of this, by putting your phone on black and white mode, you can significantly decrease your motivation to be going on your phone and scrolling on apps. Secondly, ability. We want to make it as difficult as possible to actually carry out the behaviors that are wasting our time and keeping us distracted. And the way that we do this is to install barriers. A barrier is essentially something that makes it difficult for you to be able to do the behavior that you don't want to do. So in the case of mindlessly scrolling on your phone or being addicted to your phone, we want to install barriers to make this as difficult as possible. And we do this by deleting the social media apps and any other apps that you don't want to be scrolling on off your phone. Because the second that you delete them from your phone, if you then want to go on the apps, you either have to log in through your browser, which again takes time, and even if you do that, they're less appealing once you're on your browser, especially when your phone is already in grayscale mode. So any apps that you find that you're spending too much time on, or that you'd like to spend less time on, or just be less addicted to, delete them off your phone. Just simply by putting your phone on grayscale and then deleting the apps off your phone will become so unappealing, and there'll be such a big barrier there in the first place. This alone can significantly decrease the time spent doing the destructive behavior. And finally, we get to triggers. So we'll start with external triggers and then we'll get to internal triggers, because they can be a little bit more difficult because of how these app developers and social media companies have manipulated your behavior up until this point. So for external triggers, the way that this normally happens is you probably have notifications turned on your phone, which means that at any point you can be sent a notification which will distract your attention and then motivate you to carry out the behavior. So as a blanket rule of thumb, we want to turn all notifications off on the phone. No vibrations, no home screen notifications, nothing. So the only way you can actually receive the notification is if you open up the app and look inside it. Then once you combine this with the fact that you've deleted the social media and any other apps that you don't want to be wasting time on off your phone, the external trigger is just no longer there anymore. By turning all notifications off on your phone, you can substantially reduce the amount of external triggers you can get, motivating you to carry out these addictive behaviors. Then once you combine that with the fact that you've deleted most of the negative apps off your phone that you don't want to be wasting your time on, when you then receive an internal trigger, it makes it much more difficult to carry out the behavior. And then finally, internal triggers. Internal triggers and habits can be carried out without conscious thought. The social media platforms, the app developers have been incredibly effective at making their products as addictive as possible, but you have subsequently developed destructive habits and addictions to going on these platforms. For example, the second that you experience a pang of boredom, it could well be that the first thing you do is go to your phone, open up social media and try and get some kind of distraction and excitement. So So to eliminate the internal trigger and the habits that have been created, this can take a period of time, but one of the most effective ways to do this is to remind ourselves of our new identity as a dopamine warrior, instead of that as a dopamine little bitch who's addicted to these apps and addicted to these destructive behaviors. So if you're like most people, you probably open your phone up countless times a day out of habit and not because you actually need to be going on it. So to remind ourselves consciously of our new identity, one of the best ways you can do this is to put something on your phone screen. This can be literally an elastic band, or even by sellotaping something to your phone screen to make your phone screen even less appealing to go on, so that when you experience the internal trigger and go to your phone to then carry out that automated habitualized behavior of trying to scroll, you see the reminder that you're a dopamine warrior and that you're no longer the kind of person to do this kind of thing. And then by using a pre-programmed thought pattern, which we talk about in other tutorials, you're going to internally remind yourself and build a habit of internally reminding yourself that you can cope by not doing this. And then even if all of that fails and then you still open up your phone, you're then going to find it on grayscale, you're then going to find that the apps are no longer there. And then if you're still going to access the apps, you're going to have to do it via your browser, which is a lot less appealing. The internal trigger part is the hardest part to break, because that's become habitualized by all these companies that have known just how powerful it is for you to develop these destructive habits. For the behavior to occur, these three things need to be there, yet if any of them aren't there, the behavior can't happen. So when you experience that internal trigger, even if the motivation is there, if you don't have the ability because the apps are no longer on your phone and then your phone's on grayscale, make it incredibly boring to look at, you're making the behavior of not going on your phone easy. So these are the steps. This is what you have been up against by these billion-dollar social media companies and app developers and smartphone companies. This is why it's not your fault. Society's done nothing to protect you from this, but this is how you take back control, regain the focus and productivity and attention span that you had before smartphones came on the scene. You can still utilize the power of smartphones for productive reasons, but by doing this, you're getting rid of the addictiveness of it and you're taking back control, so you can use your phone as a tool for when you want to, but not for when you don't want to, and have it working against you. So let's do these things now and take back control.